Hey guys, welcome to Wrench to Drive. This is a quick video on some crawler axle tech. If you want to make some cheap crawler axles, 3D printing, or run some cheap crawler axles, there's a few tips that you probably need to know. And I was not savvy to this, so I wanted to share it with you. One of the things you can get cheap on the internet is these Injora solid spool ring and pinion gears. So there's your ring gear. The solid spool goes inside your diff carrier, and then you get the pinion that comes with it, and that drives your axle. Now here's the solid spool, and this is the part that if you're running the WLToys axles, you're not going to have, because they run a diff. And I do like running a diff, but if you want to run a solid spool, this is a really cheap way to go. Now there's only one problem. And I'm going to show you a picture of this because I've already done a little work, and you can see that this orifice here, the opening, is looking pretty rectangular, and you can probably see just the hint that there's a little strip of metal in there that I added. When you order the spool, the cutout in it is square, and I'll show you a picture. And there's a problem with that, and I'm not quite sure what the deal is, because I thought that these were Injora kind of authentic drive shafts. I got these super cheap off Amazon. It turns out that they did not fit into the spool, and there's two problems with these. There was they were too wide for the square orifice. So you can see that it's a beveled. There's two beveled sides, and then the profile of this was a round shaft, and it's just kind of been ground down. Not super tricky. It was too big. This dimension here from end to end was too big. That to me was a surprise. I did not expect that to happen. Alright, and this is 5 millimeters. 4.5. Okay, so not even 5. And it didn't fit. And that's more or less a standard dimension. I think I've showed this on previous videos, but I'll show it again. Here's another set of rear drive shafts, a set of cheapos that I got. Same deal. This is kind of a standard thing, so I did not expect this to be a problem. And the dimension of the flats is 3 millimeters, roughly 3.2. And on these, 3.2. Notice the same. They're basically all the same, guys, or at least so I thought. Now this spool, not good to go. Now all I did, okay, so I used this milling tool, and I just opened up that orifice a little bit, very gently. This is soft aluminum, very easy to machine. So that was super easy, guys. Didn't take very long, very easy. No big deal. Now, the other problem, aside from opening that up so you can fit the shaft in at all, was that it was too wide. So there was a lot of play when you would wiggle that shaft. When you would turn it, it would turn from side to side. This being soft aluminum, I mean, how durable that's going to be, I'm not entirely sure. And the one thing I can't tell you is if you order actual genuine Injora spool with Injora drive shafts, if those drive shafts fit perfectly. They might. Though that's like the one set of drive shafts I have not ordered. Now the set of axles I have was not 100% Injora branded. They were some no-names off Amazon, so I do not know for sure if they're 100% compatible. And what can I tell you? I don't have all the answers. Now the bottom line is that if the Injora axles are a little bit, if the ends are a little bit wider, they're not going to fit other things as easily, but you can always grind them down. So you can always grind them down using one of these cutoff discs. You just use it as like a grinding wheel, and you can easily, imagine this is spinning. You just burp, grind that down. Doesn't take very long, really easy. Just real slow, like, make sure you don't take off too much, get it to fit nice. Now with this, the trick was that it was too loose, and that's a little bit more tricky to fix. Not super hard, but a little bit more tricky. So I didn't have any shim material. All I used, and I've done this before, this is battery strapping. So this is just nickel coated steel. This is 0.1 millimeter. I believe there's a thicker variety. I got 0.1 because it suited my needs for spot welding battery packs together. But all you do is whatever size of piece you need. If this is big enough, this dimension, this side to side, which is 5 millimeters, I believe. yeah, 5 millimeters. If that's big enough, and in this case it's actually a little bit too big, but as long as it's big enough, you're laughing. And then all you do is fold it over, like so, and then you use a pair of vice grips to squeeze it nice and flat, because as you can see right there, it's not super flat. Hard to do it by hand and get it super nice and flat. Pliers might work. Vice grips work really well because you can squeeze nice and tight. So all you do is squeeze it flat, and I did 5 layers, and then you fold it over again, and you squeeze it flat, fold it over again, squeeze it flat. Alright, you end up with a thicker piece of metal that you can use as a shim, and you can make it however thick you need it. Alright, and then, because it was a little bit too big, all I did was I grabbed it with the vice grips, like so, and I used a bigger set so the jaws were a little bit bigger to protect the metal. You just grab it with your vice grips, and then you use your rotary tool with the cutoff disc, and you just burp, 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 and you just grind it down until you take off about 1 millimeter or so, which is what I needed to do for this particular shim. Now, with this scenario, what you want to do is you want to make sure that this spool is as close to kind of one piece as possible, so that you can successfully put together this axle, right? Because this is going to be inside the axle, then you got to insert the drive shafts from either end and get it to work, right? So all you got to do is attach that shim, and all I used was a little bit of super glue. So I just used some super glue. I squeezed it in there, and I tried it with Loctite at first because I thought that would show up on video and kind of show you, but it was a pain in the butt. Loctite actually didn't work that well. Super glue worked a lot better. And all you do is use either the drive shaft or a pair of tweezers or anything that you can kind of poke it with, and you use that when you get the super glue in there, and you just make sure it's attached, press it down, hold it in place, and you're good. And then the other side will probably be sticking up a little bit or something. Same thing, you just pry it up a little bit, put a little super glue in, squeeze it down, hold it in place till it sets, let it go. Super glue is quite brittle, so getting the shafts in there, if you have a little residue, not that difficult. You can scrape it away a little bit with the tweezers. You just got to be careful. If it doesn't work, you can take another crack at it. It's really not super difficult. And then you end up with a piece of metal that's basically solid. You can insert those drive shafts, nice and solid. No play. It's going to work really well. It can be a little bit tricky to put together, but it shouldn't be too bad. And as you can see, I've had this apart a couple times, and that piece of metal staying in there pretty well. So yeah, there you go. And that should work pretty well, guys, I think. For measurement purposes, one of the things you can see here, you can see, hopefully, that the Injora one here versus the WLToys one, the gear is exactly the same, except the beefy part is slightly thinner. The Injora is a little bit thinner, this one right here. A little bit thinner than the WLToys, but that's okay. It fits inside the 3D printed axle just fine. The bearings fit on the ends just fine. It sits in the bearing cups just fine. Basically, it's all good, guys. So you can use WLToys gears or Injora gears. Now, the only problem is the Injora pinion is a little bit different. I'm going to compare them here. I'll show you. So, without a doubt, the WLToys one is the nicest one because it has this web connecting all the teeth, makes it that much more durable. You can see that dimensionally it's going to work just fine. This one is the Injora. Notice the shaft is a little bit shorter. That's something you need to pay attention to. Most of the time it'll work just fine. It's a bit of an issue because if the bearings aren't holding it perfectly, there can be a little bit of play there. This is another WLToys, or quote unquote WLToys. It's not authentic WLToys. It's from some gears that I ordered online for cheap. And you can see it doesn't have the web. The gear is a little bit more beefy. And notice that the important part, the shaft here, is also longer. Now the end bit, this is basically standard, the input shaft. And this is the part that if you got a WLToys, you don't have one of these for the front. right? And it can be a bit of a pain. You can make one using a drive shaft, cut it off, and then you have the part that sticks in and is screwed into place, and then you can just machine it, make it flat, so you can use a couple of grub screws to hold it in place. But this one works just fine, and it works with any of these pinions. So it works with the Injora, it works with the WLToys, WLToys clone, and trust me, if it works with this, it works with the WLToys, because this is exactly the same dimensionally and whatnot. So there you go. That is what you need to know. And just so you know, that the Injora, it's got the spot for the C-clip, which you don't really need, but it's handy. It's just there in case you need it. And this should accommodate most aftermarket drive shafts. So there you go. I hope that is everything you need to know. If you have these bits and bobs, you can put together a running axle using my 3D printed parts. That's it. That's a quickie, guys. Hopefully that is useful information. There's a lot of stuff in common with cheap crawler parts, and the whole trick is having enough of them so you can compare. Hopefully that's been of use to you. If anybody has any information to share, by all means, fire away in the comments below. You know, that's a nice thing about the internet. If everybody shares the information, life becomes much simpler. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Wrench to Drive, where we ask the eternal question: do you drive to wrench, or do you wrench to drive?